The room smelled of disinfectant and quiet despair, monitors blinking like tired eyes in the dim hospital light, when the Marine veteran's lips trembled and he leaned closer to the nurse as if the walls themselves might betray him, his voice barely a breath, a plea soaked in fear and memory, "Don't send me home," and in that fragile moment, before anyone knew what would follow, a life balanced on the edge of being forgotten. Because sometimes the most dangerous battles are not fought with bullets but with loneliness. And before this story unfolds any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity showing up when it matters most, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs hope today, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this connect hearts across the world. His name was Daniel Carter, a former Marine Corps sergeant whose body carried scars the way old houses carry cracks, quietly, permanently, telling stories no one asked to hear anymore, and as he lay in that hospital bed, bones aching, lungs weak, memories heavier than his failing body, he wasn't afraid of dying as much as he was afraid of being discharged into nothingness, because home, for Daniel, meant a rotting trailer on the edge of town, power cut off, refrigerator empty, nights filled with pain and flashbacks, and days spent choosing between medication and food, a place where silence screamed louder than any battlefield he had survived. The nurse, Emily Rhodes, had seen suffering before, but something in Daniel's eyes stopped her, the way they searched her face not for medicine but for mercy, and she read his chart again knowing what it said in cold medical language: medically stable, ready for discharge, no family listed, no emergency contact, no visitors in 3 weeks. A man who had once led Marines through fire now reduced to a line item in a hospital system stretched thin and forced to move people along. Emily had chosen nursing because she believed care didn't end with vitals and charts, and as she stood there, she felt the familiar conflict between policy and conscience tighten in her chest, because rules said Daniel would be sent home within hours, but her instincts screamed that sending him home was the same as abandoning him. And she learned quietly from another nurse that Daniel had refused discharge twice before, becoming agitated, begging staff not to make him leave, not because he wanted to stay in the hospital, but because he knew what waited for him outside: the cold, the hunger, the isolation, and the crushing sense that the country he served no longer had a place for him. That night, after her shift, Emily sat in her car scrolling aimlessly until she remembered something Daniel had mentioned days earlier while drifting in and out of sleep: a tattoo he had on his arm, faded but recognizable, the symbol of a motorcycle club he used to ride with before life unraveled, the Hells Angels. Years ago, Daniel had ridden with a local charter, not as a criminal or outlaw stereotype, but as a brother among men who didn't ask questions about nightmares or tremors, men who understood loyalty in a way few others did. But after his health declined and money dried up, shame pushed him away, and he stopped answering calls, convinced he had become a burden, convinced real men didn't ask for help, especially not Marines, especially not bikers. Emily hesitated, knowing the reputation attached to that name, knowing the hospital would never approve of contacting them, but she also knew that desperation sometimes demands courage that looks like rule-breaking, so she searched quietly, found a public contact for the local chapter, and sent a short, careful message explaining only that a former Marine and former member was about to be discharged with nowhere safe to go, and she expected nothing, maybe even backlash, but instead her phone buzzed within minutes, a simple response asking for his name, followed by another asking which hospital. The next morning, the hospital buzzed with its usual routine: carts rolling, alarms chiming, staff moving quickly, until the sound came that didn't belong, a deep, rumbling thunder that grew louder by the second. Engines, not one or two, but many, echoing through the parking structure and spilling into the street outside, heads turning, security stepping closer to windows, nurses pausing mid-step, as the noise became impossible to ignore, and when the first bikes rolled into view, black and chrome glinting in the sun, leather vests heavy with patches, jaws set with purpose, the hospital seemed to hold its breath, because no one expected what came next. One by one, then in waves, motorcycles filled every available space, spilling into nearby lots and streets, until nearly 300 Hells Angels had arrived, men and women from charters hours away who had ridden through the night after one call, one message, one name that mattered to them. Inside, Daniel lay unaware, staring at the ceiling, bracing himself for the inevitable conversation about discharge, when Emily entered the room, her eyes shining, hands trembling, and instead of asking him to pack his things, she told him to listen, and as the engines roared outside, tears welled in his eyes, because he knew that sound, a sound he hadn't heard directed toward him in years, a sound that once meant family. And when the first angel stepped into the room, removing his helmet with quiet respect, followed by another and another, Daniel broke down, not loudly, but in the way men cry when walls finally collapse, realizing they were never as alone as they believed. The presence of the bikers changed everything. Hospital administrators scrambled, security stood down, and nurses watched in stunned silence as these rough-looking men formed a quiet honor guard around Daniel's bed, speaking to staff calmly, respectfully, explaining that Daniel would not be discharged into the streets, that they had arranged housing, medical support, food, and transportation, that one of their own would stay with him around the clock if needed, and that whatever paperwork or coordination was required, they would make it happen. More than that, they brought stories, reminders of rides taken years ago, of laughter, of loyalty, of the man Daniel had been before illness tried to erase him, and slowly, something in Daniel shifted, his shoulders relaxing, his breathing steadying, the fear that had haunted him finally loosening its grip. Over the next days, what followed felt less like charity and more like restoration, the Hells Angels coordinating with veteran organizations, covering expenses the system couldn't, renovating a small accessible apartment donated by a supporter, stocking it with food, furniture, and warmth, while Emily visited on her days off, watching Daniel regain color in his face, watching him smile in ways that didn't look forced, watching him accept help without shame, learning that strength isn't only measured by endurance but by the courage to be carried when you can no longer stand alone. Word spread quietly through the hospital, through the town, through online spaces where cynicism often dominates, and people began to see a different side of Brotherhood, one that doesn't abandon its own, one that shows up not for applause but because someone whispered a need. As weeks passed, Daniel began physical therapy, supported on both sides by bikers who joked with therapists and cheered at every small victory, and for the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a future not defined by fear, but by connection, purpose, and dignity, and Emily, standing back, understood that sometimes healing doesn't come from medicine alone but from being seen, remembered, and claimed by those who refuse to let you disappear. Just before this story ends, we ask you to do one simple thing: leave a comment below with a word of support for veterans who are fighting silent battles, because those words reach further than you think. In the end, Daniel was never sent home in the way he feared, because home turned out to be something built from loyalty, compassion, and action, roaring into a hospital parking lot when one man thought the world had moved on without him. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that humanity still shows up in unexpected ways, please like, share, and engage with this video, because every interaction helps stories like Daniel's reach someone who may be whispering the same words tonight, hoping someone, anyone, will hear them.